sixth graders. This week we're going to be reviewing the things that we've learned earlier in the year about fractions, percents, and decimals, and how to convert between them. And then next week we're going to start solving some problems with percents, finding percents of a quantity, sale prices, tips, and all that good stuff. So let's start by reviewing what we already know. Sorry about the dog in the background. Apparently there's invisible boogeyman outside the window. So earlier in the year we talked about how there's different ways to show a part of an amount. We can show it as a percent, as a fraction, or as a decimal. So take, for instance, the fraction a half. 1/2, written as a decimal, you guys know is 5/10, which would be written with a decimal point and 5. Half of a cookie is also 50% of a cookie. So we can show that half of a cookie as a fraction, a decimal, and as a percent. In today's lesson, I'm going to show you how to go back and forth between those. Going from a decimal to a percent is easy. It really just means we're going to be moving the decimal point. If we're going from a decimal to a percent, we're actually multiplying your decimal times 100 to get the percent, which means we're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. If we're going from percent to decimal, we're dividing by 100, which means we're going to move that decimal point 2 places to the left. So for instance, if we had the decimal point 75 hundredths, I'm going to multiply that by 100 by moving my decimal point 2 places to the right. 75 hundredths, I'm going to move it, which gives me the whole number 75. So 75 hundredths is 75%. If I had 34 hundredths, same deal. If I want to make that into a percent, I'm going to multiply it by 100. And I'm going to move that decimal point 2 places to the right. I'm going to move it. And 34 hundredths is the same amount as 34%. If I'm going from percent to decimal, it's the same deal. It's just my decimal point's going the other direction. So 15%, I'm going to divide it by 100. That means my decimal point's going to move 2 places to the left. 1, 2. So 15% is 15 hundredths. With 8%, I've still got to move my decimal point 2 places. So I move it 1 place, 2 places, but I have wide open spaces now. I have to fill in that extra space with a 0. So 8 hundredths is the same thing as 8%. So from decimal to percent, all I've got to do is move my decimal point. On the other hand, when we're going from fractions to decimals, it's a little bit more complicated. I want to start by saying that if in doubt, using division will always work. Division is not a 4-letter word. It will always work in this case, no matter what numerator and denominator you have. So let's start with a half. You guys know that's 5/10. Let me show you how it works. 1/2 simply means 1 divided by 2. So I'm going to set that up. The top number always goes inside the doghouse. 1 divided by 2. Now you guys know you can't get any 2's out of 1, so I'm going to make that 1. 1 decimal point 0. Will 2 fit into 1? No, you guys know it won't. Will 2 fit into 10? Yep, it'll fit in 5 times. 2 times 5 is 10. With none left over. Then we have to remember to bring the decimal point up. So 1/2 equals 5/10. We could do the same thing with 3/4. 3/4 literally means 3 divided by 4, but you know that 4 won't go into 3. So I'm going to stick a 0 or 2 afterwards. I don't necessarily know how many, but I'll work with it. Will 4 divide 3? Nope. Will 4 divide 30? Yes, 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. 2 left over, I'm going to bring down the 0. 4 divides 20 5 times with none left over. Bring up my decimal point, and 3/4 is the same as 75 hundredths. What about 3/8? I think most of you kind of knew from money off the top of your head, half a dollar is 50 cents, 3/4 of a dollar is 75 cents. But what about 3/8? That literally means 3 divided by 8. And we know 8's not going to go into 3, so I'll stick a 0. 8 won't divide 3. 8 divides 30 3 times. 8 times 3 is 24. 6 left over, but when we're dealing with decimals, we can't have leftovers. So instead of 3.0, I'm going to make the equivalent decimal 3.00. 8 divides 60 7 times. 8 times 7, running out of space in my paper, is 56. 60 minus 56 is 4. I still don't have a good stopping place, so I'm going to bring another 0 down. And here we have a good spot. 8 divides 40 5 times. None left over. Bring up my decimal point. 3/8 is 375 thousandths. Now, sometimes there's a shortcut. If your divisor is a factor of 10, I actually meant denominator, but it still works. It's still the divisor. If my denominator is a factor of 10 or 100, you can just turn it into a decimal flavor. Let me show you what I mean. 3/5. Decimals don't come in fifths. But they do come in tenths. That's a pretty easy equivalent fraction to find. 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6. You wind up with 6 tenths. 6 tenths is written as 6 tenths. Pretty easy, huh? 15 20ths. Well, 20 will go into 100. 20 times 5 is 100. 15 times 5 is 75. 75 hundredths is written a decimal point and 75. 3/40ths. 40 will go into 1,000, I think. Maybe? I was thinking 40 would go into 200, and I just made my life difficult. I'm going to do this one with division. That literally means 3 divided by 40. I'm sorry I made my life difficult. 40 won't go into 3. 40 won't go into 30. 40 will go into 300 6 times. That's 240. That's too many, so it'll go in 7 times. 280 with 20 left over. Bring down a 0. 4 divides 200 5 times. So that actually is 0.075. And I'm sorry about that. I thought I was being clever with that one. So, fractions to decimal, division always works. Sometimes finding an equivalent fraction will work. Now, the easiest thing to remember is that decimal is always going to be your rest stop between fractions and percents. There really is not a graceful way to go straight from fractions to percents. So your best course of action is to go to decimals and then figure out percent. So let's figure out a decimal for 2/5. 2/5. 5 goes into 10 evenly, so I'm just going to do the equivalent fractions. 2 times 2 is 4. And that would be 4 tenths. Now we could find the percent by multiplying our decimal by 100. We're going to move it. So that's 40%. 11 25ths. 25 will go into 100. That's times 4. So that would be 44 hundredths. So I've got the decimal of 44 hundredths. Then all I have to do to go from decimal to percent is move that decimal point 2 places. That's 44%. 9 20ths. 20 times 5 is 100. 9 times 5 is 45. And we get 45 hundredths. 45 hundredths is 45%. Okay. So, This week, you're going to be working on going from fractions to decimals, decimals to percents, and back again. Today and this week is going to be great practice for you, and it's going to be skills you're going to have to know to be able to do the following week's skills of finding a percent of a number. So have fun, enjoy, get some practice on IXL, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.